There are many positives and negatives to having a subsystem, and having a extensive subsystem means that you can develop distinct playstyles. Maybe with one playstyle you're more defensive on the top side of the map, but the bottom side you're more aggressive, or vice versa. So as you can see, there are great positives in terms of differentiating your playstyle from one roster system to another, but there are also negatives as well too, and that instead of spending time developing two play styles, you could have just focused on multiple facets with a singular player or even just one other sub. And that goes along to say with scrim time and analytics time, and how much that you need to study for this other player in terms of cohesion within the entire team, because that takes a very long time to create synergy with another player being integrated into a roster, because there's not only the vocal communication that you need to develop, but there's the nonverbal communication, the just inherent synergy, the ability to know the tendencies of your actual teammates and then to flow off of those. And that's when you see a really spectacular amount of synergy between players that just doesn't develop at a rapid pace. That's something that is more developed over time rather than in a short span. So it's very difficult to have a sub roster. And with that said, if you do have, say, one or two subs or three subs, and then you get to an international tournament where there is only allowed one sub, then all of your training with the other sub might just be for nothing, right? It all just goes to shit. And that's where it happened with SKT. Is probably the most famous example, because they actually had a decent subsystem in 2017 with Blank and Peanut, and then Huni and Untara. Because Blank and Peanut, their differences lied in that Peanut was the more aggressive jungler, right? He would be in your face, he would counter jungle, and he would kind of try and carry the game just from the jungle role specifically. Whereas Blank was a little bit more selfless. He had more vision control, or more emphasis on vision control, and he could help kind of snowball the other lanes instead of himself. And then you have Huni and Untara, which Huni was the kind of loose cannon guy who would try and do the 1v1 and just get a snowball advantage in the top lane, versus Untara was their tank player. He would play more defensive and not require as many resources in the top side of the map. So you had these two very distinct play styles, and when you're going up against a team like that, it's kind of very difficult to accommodate yourself when you're the opponent, because you don't really know which one's going to come out, and you have to be prepared for both circumstances when that comes. So Riot's decision to only have one sub within an international tournament, I think, is very intelligent, because Riot does this because rich teams can fly out their subs whereas poor teams can't. So if you were to have a unlimited cap, to where, say to a larger degree, and although I know it's slightly unrealistic currently, at least maybe not in the future when esports grows to such a high rate to where people have bigger salary budgets in order to do this, but if we implemented 10-man rosters being allowed, between games or within an international tournament, you could change your entire team between games. I mean, just imagine having Samsung Blue and Samsung White, and having, Samsung Blue as your back burner team, to where, oh yeah, we're going to sub them in and completely surprise you. That would suck to face against, right? So we can't have something get blown out of proportion like that. Something even as simple as having, a two-man sub roster, that could change a team dramatically, as we saw with the SKT lineup. That's very difficult to face against, because you have to have the analytics in order to go into a match against SKT. You have to know what picks and bans that they're going to do and how they're going to change that up. Not only that, but their play style you have to prepare for, and maybe you don't match up well against a specific play style, such as, you know, a carry top laner with your specific team. So I just think this is not a feasible financial burden from either Riot or from unwealthy teams, you know, such as, say, at MSI 2018 currently, EVOS probably can't afford to have multiple subs for this tournament. And if you think about that, EVOS at home, or these emerging regions at home, they probably can't even afford to have subs within their team house. So how are they going to afford to fly out subs over to this international tournament, right? And to accommodate them over there. And now if the financial burden mostly relies on Riot, which it does for the flights and for the hotels and everything, just imagine having 3 subs for every single team that comes to MSI. And this is, you could say, to the group stages. That's 3 extra players times 6 teams. That's 18 extra players. That's 18 extra hotel rooms. That's 18 extra PCs and peripherals. That's 18 extra mouths to feed, and 18 extra people to fit inside the back of the venue, along with all their analysts and such. That's a lot to ask. That's a lot of extra money, and that's not even counting the play-in stage with those other, you know, emerging regions trying to fight through to get into the group stage. So you have to add 3 more players for all those other teams if you raise the sub count for these international tournaments. So it becomes a large ordeal, a large undertaking, both for Riot and for these other teams, especially the emerging region teams. And I just think it's a little bit unfair, and I think it creates this type of animosity between regions to where only the wealthy ones can afford to have such luxuries. So I think it's better for Riot to level the playing field, at least until now, while esports is kind of in its infancy. I think a lot of us forget that there are a lot of the parts of the rest of the world that doesn't have as much money as, say, North America or Europe or China. So I think in that regard, it's good for Riot to limit it at a hard cap of one sub, even though I would love to see these differentiating play styles just from one team. I think overall it's a little bit more healthy for Riot to limit it to one sub specifically.